Super speed, super graphics, super attitude. It's Super Sonic. Sega! And welcome to Sega-stalgia. That's right, the chronological exploration of every Sega Genesis game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Guys, today we have a big one.
This is the one we've all been waiting
for
this whole time.
I mean, it took 97 episodes, but we are here with Sonic the Hedgehog.
It's amazing that, this is just like Christmas Day.
Joe, I remember you saying way back on, episode 34 that you couldn't wait for Sonic to come, and I understand you've been playing a lot?
Recently I have been. I didn't play when I was a kid, so... what was episode 34? I'm trying
to
remember.
That was Columns?
Oh, right,
the puzzle game?
Right. Because I think we had a few puzzle games, and I was just ready to get into some of that platforming.
Right. You said enough of the puzzles. I'm tired of.
Yeah, I love puzzle games too, but I was just thinking of Sega.
Here's the thing, Joe. I don't know how you went your entire time being a Sega fan. Otherwise, why would you be on this podcast? And you hadn't played Sonic?
Well, I didn't grow up with a Genesis or anything. I really, most of these games I'm playing for the first time, which is what I think is the point of this podcast.
Right, which is true. And so for those of you that are uninformed, Sonic the Hedgehog is the better version of any Super Mario Brothers game. And, despite it being an homage to Super Mario Brothers, I think that you'll realize that even though Sonic plays similar, it's definitely different and not a copy. And we're going to explain why when we get into the gameplay section.
Oh, for sure. Honestly, I don't think you could even call Sonic an homage. It was designed to destroy Super Mario, and I think that it accomplished its job.
In many ways, Sonic the Hedgehog actually taught Super Mario a lot of things about what they would implement in later games.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a very long story into the creation of Sonic. Sega was going through some problems. As you guys know, they were looking for a mascot. They had one in Alex Kidd, but Alex Kidd is no Mario. So Sega said, you guys got to come up with something better. Let's really think about this whole mascot process. So they went through an entire design form of just thinking about what should be the mascot before ever designing a game around that mascot, which is kind of weird, right? Don't you think you should just make the game first? And then be oh, this is a good game. Let's design a mascot for it.
Well, I mean, I think that when you look back on the mascots of old, it's always a marketing first thing. I don't think that Sega did all that much research into Alex Kidd because let's be honest, when we played that game, we called him a buffoon. So right. You need to do a little bit more market research to make a good. To make a good mascot, and I think they actually did that here.
I don't think that means though that you couldn't have stumbled into a good mascot. They could have just made a great game and happened upon a mascot, but I don't think you could set out to make a mascot game without doing what you're talking about, Sean. If your goal is to make a mascot game, then you have to.
Yeah, and I forget, did Tony the Tiger come first, or did the Frosted Flakes?
Yeah,
I
that's
believe
a good
it
point.
was Frosted Flakes.
It'd be really funny if they were we've got this great tiger character. What can it go with? Maybe cereal or something?
Anyway, back to the story of the creation of Sonic. Sega, when they were developing ideas for a mascot, they said, no, we want fast characters. We don't want, kangaroos or anything like that. So they were okay, fine. Here's a rabbit. So they were doing a rabbit for a really long time, and then they were no, we need something that can curl in a ball to do an attack. So that's how they came across a hedgehog, and that gets us into the design of the hedgehog, which first off, who would have raised your hand if you thought picking a hedgehog to go up against a character like Mario would have been a good idea?
It looks like we're all raising our hands.
It's because we know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I would say I don't know that I would have come up with what I would have thought that back then, before it happened. But now looking at it, I think it makes sense to not necessarily go in the exact same direction as your competitor and kind of do this let's go a cool animal route instead of a Italian plumber.
Yeah, I really think that I don't know what Nintendo was thinking when they just decided to make their character a stereotype of an ethnicity, and I think that The good thing that Sega did was they sort of sidestepped that entire problem and went with an animal, so you don't like offend an entire nation.
Right. And Naoto Oshima, who was the designer for Sonic's, like, basically like everything that they would follow when they went into programming the game, he has since admitted that when he was creating Sonic's basic design, all he did was combine Felix the cat's head with Mickey Mouse's body. And that's like an interesting Frankenstein, and I think a genius decision by Sega.
I can see it. I can actually kind of see that now.
Okay, so then from there, Sega turns to Yuji Naka, who was the programmer for Phantasy Star on the Sega Master System. If you'll remember, we played Phantasy Star 2 early on the Genesis, one of our
EGL
RPGs.
games.
Absolutely. And also Ghouls and Ghosts, he was the programmer for, just for the Genesis version, not the arcade version. And he wanted to make a Super Mario Brothers game, but he said that he wanted to make it faster. Everything had to be faster because he was dealing with making many slow games. And so finally they needed something with speed. So this all happened when he was playing Super Mario Brothers to get some inspiration. And he wondered, why can't you clear the levels more quickly? So that's when you get Bravery and you get Sonic the Hedgehog. As development continued, the team was actually reading Famitsu. You guys know what Famitsu is?
It's that like really bad like Nintendo chronicler, right?
Right. They're basically, I mean, they chronicle all Japanese video games and development and stuff like that to get kids excited. It's a weekly trade thing. It comes, I think it's actually monthly now that I think about it. But basically, okay. It tells you like what's happening. It's like a magazine for video games that's been running since like the early 80s. And they were reading it while they were developing the game to read the reviews to see what Famitsu was critiquing in other games and avoid their mistakes.
It's a good idea.
Great idea. The game, of course, would release finally in June of 91, beating Super Mario World to North American markets by just 2 months. The first thing we have to talk about here is the Sega synthesizer sound at the start. You know, like that's just genius, and that's so familiar in everybody's brains now. But this was the first time it was implemented, as far as I can remember. Yeah. So to have like a voice synthesis saying the words from the commercial, you know, that's how they played them out in the commercials. To have that actually happen in the game, I love that.
Yeah, it sounds really good too. It sounds kind of close to like voice.
For sure. Like when I mentioned it in the first few episodes that like because of what I was used to, like when I was a kid playing the Genesis on my brother's device, like I always remembered this during like the beginning of every game. And like for the first 96 episodes to not hear that, it was just so weird.
And also then immediately you're greeted by like this like great sprite work of Sonic, and he's just kind of like wagging his finger at you. What is that all about?
Yeah, he's like cheeky about it. He's like I kind of think he's saying like I'm the cool mascot. You know?
Yeah. He's got a lot of tood.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's almost telling you like don't play this game because you can't handle it.
Yeah, it's like it's a little bit like
you've been a bad boy and your parents don't like this. Rebel against your parents.
Yeah, maybe actually that's what it was programmed to do, is like there's actually versions where if you finished your homework, he doesn't wag his finger but just gives like a thumbs up.
I think you're right.
Right. So let's just talk a little bit about Sonic and the gameplay. I'm talking specifically about the character here. You know, the size of Sonic in the game, it's interesting because, you know, I get it. We're in 16-bit graphics now, and we've seen bigger sized graphics for, you know, like Altered Beast and Golden Axe. Those characters were bigger. But in a platformer, this is a pretty big character for a platformer. And when you go up against the size of Sonic versus the size of the screen, it's kind of a miracle that they could make this whole thing work with, you know, the fast-scrolling nature of it, but still being able to anticipate what was coming at you.
I think it also, going with the fast theme of everything, I think making him bigger and making the obstacles a little bigger, just scaling everything up makes that a little bit easier to manage because there's not as much kind of coming at you at once because you're moving so quickly.
I don't know. I mean, this is a really busy, it's a very busy looking game. There's a lot of bright colors. There's a lot of beautiful art. And like the fact that this can keep up at like a good, 30, 60 frames, like I think it's really just the frame rate that allows you to track everything.
Yeah, it's actually 60 frames, and they were doing something. Sean, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm sure I have this in the notes somewhere. But when they were doing testing, they were having problems with the 60 frames where Sonic and the speed of everything, it was like kind of every like 59 frames, essentially, you'd miss one of Sonic. So there would be like this weird filtering in and out effect. So they had to actually reverse program it so that the number of objects on screen would never get to a point that it couldn't render all of them at once.
That's actually, that's some very creative design work, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, they designed Sonic in a way that his default speed is always the speed of Mario running. Wow. So the game is never slow. You can't walk at the rate, say, like how Mario walks.
Why would you want to?
But I do think, as far as like the way the character controls, it does feel like it moves faster. But I think after the first world, maybe the first two worlds, it's not. I don't think the levels are necessarily always designed for you to be moving quickly.
Oh no,
that's
they
something
are.
That's something that I noticed, at least in the second level. There's a lot of times you have to stop, you have to be careful, you have to meticulously time things.
Yeah, are you talking about Marble Hill Zone?
Yeah. Whereas in the first level, I feel like, this is like, you can really kind of get on a roll here. In the second level, I feel like the level itself is almost designed to like compete with your want to go fast.
Joe, I absolutely agree. I put this as a note here. Because the character himself, right? We talked about the size of everything and the scrolling nature because you can only fit so much. The game's constantly pretty much scrolling, and it has this effect of feeling like you're going backwards, kind of, in a weird way. Like Sonic's moving forward, but the screen is moving, at a rate faster. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you're kind of losing your place on the map. But he's also so fast that when he stops, it also has like this momentum attached to it where he actually has to he has like this foot animation where he like stops on his heels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. But to counteract that, to what Joe was saying, the level exploration kind of makes me wonder, like, is the goal to go fast, or was that like a later thing? Like, everybody knows Sonic's catchphrase, gotta go fast, but is that true for this 1991 Genesis game? I don't know.
Well, I feel like they set a really great standard with Emerald with the first level,
Green Hill Zone.
Green Hill Zone, yeah. So you could just jump over half the stage at certain points, and it really rewards going fast. And then finally, that's its pilot episode, and then we get over to episode 2, or Marble Hill Zone, and it starts to like change like what Mario, wow,
yeah, Sonic, yeah,
what Sonic is trying to be, and I don't think that succeeded, but I think that with the worlds after that, it does sort of get back to what makes Sonic work.
I think, in a way, the variety of even the length of the stages is a really interesting choice here because, as Sean mentioned, Green Hill Zone appreciates your chaos.
Yeah.
Go as fast as you want, go wherever you want. Like you can pretty much get through the stage as long as you're not being too careless because there's like 1 or 2 pits, I believe.
Yeah.
Now, when you get to Marble Hill Zone, all of a sudden the game kind of says, well, like, hold up. There is this thing called platforming, and now you're in a cave, so you kind of got to like play at our speed. After that, though, when you get to the Labyrinth Zone or even the very late stages like Scrap Brain Zone, Scrap Brain Zone would destroy most players who are being reckless because there's just like open pits everywhere. You can't just run out into the open because almost everything's designed to have you fall into a bottomless pit.
And that's all true. Like starting with Marble Hill, and it starts to punish you for being reckless. Like it still does allow for like this that like primordial version of speedrunning that like once you start to learn these layouts that on your first playthrough, you're probably being very cautious. You can start to realize that, like, oh, I don't need to wait for this floating box that's going over the lava to get there. Like, I could jump from platform to platform, and like it's going to require some precision, but you can still like go through the level relatively fast compared to your first playthrough. And I think that carries over past the second level.
And thematically too, it makes sense that like if Sonic lives in Green Hill Zone, he wouldn't live in a place that was dangerous for him.
Even though there are like robot bees everywhere, Mike.
But that just happened, right? That just happened, right? Sean didn't read the deep lore here. Dr. Robotnik, and that's something we should talk about too right away. Robotnik, Eggman, where do you guys stand on this? I never know what I default, I guess, to Robotnik, but I don't know where the Eggman comes from and Robotnik comes from.
I've always been
Eggman
a Robotnik
is the Japanese one.
Yeah, it's so Robotnik or go home for me.
I'm an Eggman guy, guys. I gotta tell you. I mean, he's based off of Humpty Dumpty, so
but
might as well
nowhere in the
Eggman.
nursery rhyme does it say Humpty Dumpty was an egg.
Really?
To say the nursery rhyme, it doesn't say he's an egg. Someone just drew it that way.
I don't even
once,
know any of the lines.
All the king's horses and all the king's men.
Humpty Dumpty. Nope, nothing for me. But there's no kings and there's no horses in this one, so that does make sense.
Right, that it's not Humpty Dumpty.
The allegory is getting looser. Yeah. So if Eggman has just, or Robotnik as you guys want me to call him, if he's just turned all of the animals into enemies, it is a really cool thing that anytime you destroy any enemy, you see the actual animal get freed and run away and never get harmed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really cool little touch.
Well, real quick, I mean, even in the actual manual for this game, his name is Dr. Robotnik, but that's neither here nor there. No, it seems to me though that the robots themselves aren't like being controlled by these woodland creatures. It seems that they're just being harvested for life source, because they're never like, it's always just a little birdie or a little bunny, and all these like robots are these like, they're either sharp caterpillars or they're bees, or you know what I'm saying? Like
right. I mean, this is exactly why if you don't play this game in like a genocide mode where you have to kill all the enemies, you're going, you can't be a pacifist in this game. You must free every single animal from the enemies.
But it does like give you, like if you weren't that, if you like skipped over a lot of them, it does give you the opportunity to save a bunch wholesale by stomping on that big like machine at the end.
Yeah,
right, so, at the end of each levels, after the 3 acts.
For sure.
So what you're saying is as long as you hit your quota of the number you should save, the rest are fine.
I think that's how it should work.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
And you'll also notice that like this is a much like smarter way to deal with like saving your world, whereas in Super Mario Brothers, I'm pretty sure they said that all of the blocks were toads that were transformed into blocks, and so Mario is just straight up killing the toads. I
mean, that's also just lazy.
That's
just lazy writing.
Yeah, I think that was just shoehorned into the manual or something.
Right. What is so unbelievable about blocks existing, floating blocks? Like,
and if you want to like argue like who's the more selfish player or who's the more selfish character, it's obviously going to be Mario, because he only cares about saving like one girl, whereas Sonic is saving all the animals. And it's also the better environmentalist. Yeah, I think that Sonic is the better environmentalist.
Oh yeah, hands down.
Absolutely. That's basically this whole game thematically is just about like, climate change and, evil corporations and just like sticking out for the little guy.
Exactly.
Another thing I was going to say is we didn't talk about this because we haven't talked about it a lot. We've been mostly rambling. But there's no one set path to get through any particular level. There's kind of like this ladder system of like, the high road, the middle road, and the low road. And it feels like the high road is for high skilled players.
For sure.
The medium is kind of, and you can switch between 3 of them too. It's not like if you wind up in the bottom, you're stuck there.
Yeah.
But I just thought this whole thing was very interesting in terms of exploration, because again, if the game is all about going fast, how am I ever going to find any of these other paths if I'm just supposed to blitz through this stuff?
See, I don't really see it as like exploration based. Like, yes, there is a lot to see, and you won't see all of it in one run through, but it just seems to be more being able to allow the player more expressive play. Like, it's not like I want to go see what's down in this corner. I'm not exploring in that way.
But it does seem like there are a lot of things that are hidden, no? Like, there are a lot of things that are like, oh, what's that little block over there sticking out next to a solid wall? And you go down there and you can walk through the solid wall. Things like that I feel like are more, you need to kind of, I think you're supposed to, like, stop
accidentally. Because, like, I think that when you're playing this game, you're trying to go as fast as possible, and you will accidentally find them if you just mistime a jump. Right. I think that it's good that they're there, but I don't think this is like the same kind of exploration that you might find in like in the other system, like a Metroid or something.
Fair enough. I think it's also worth noting that these levels aren't easy to design either. Naka said that it took him around 8 months just to develop Green Hill Zone, because he had to constantly keep restarting from scratch, because you only have so many elements you can place out, in the memory of the game, and then also to make sure that you don't get like locked into a specific place where if you go backwards, you can't go forward.
That's interesting. Like, I never would have thought that, like, in 91 there was like a development hell.
Right, and I guess they were stuck in it. I guess it could only happen for a game like this where you're being told that this is going to be the future of Sega. Yeah. There's not many situations where this happens for any companies. I don't think even like a company like Naughty Dog would think like, oh, well, our whole future rests on The Last of Us. Like it just happened to take off and become considered one of the best games of all time. But like, it wasn't that way from the beginning.
Yeah, because they already had the Uncharted series to fall back on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So, just to get your guys' POV on this too, for the exploration stuff, as you played some of the levels again, did you notice that you went different paths, or you kind of just keep going the same way over and over again?
Maybe a little bit, but I think I would have to be playing it. I would have to have played it more times to really start to kind of pick my favorite paths or try. I mean, I guess that's not what your question was, but like right now it's just like, what's the most intuitive path for me to go? Like, if I really knew the game really well, that's when I'd be like, okay, like this time I'm going to go this way because it's like the quicker path, or I know about these secrets over here, I'm going to try and fly through those. I think it's like the more you play, the more you perfect your path and like the most optimum way to go.
I would say that with this game, it's more of like a roll with the punches sort of thing. Like, I would attempt to go in one direction, and maybe I'll fail a jump, or I'll get stopped in my tracks, and then I have to sort of very quickly decide, I'm going to go this way instead. So, yeah, I mean, there were routes that I would have preferred to go, but you sort of end up getting better at all of them as you fail and pick yourself back up througthroughout it.
Yeah, I think roll with the punches.
Live and learn, Sean.
Exactly.
Roll with the punches seems like a really good way of putting it. I think that kind of hits it on the head.
Yeah, and sorry for cutting you off there, Joe. Right. I have to say live and learn, because obviously, Sonic fans know where I'm at, where my brother's at, all right? Yep. I mean, we're all going to escape from the city pretty soon. And then here's something I wanted to talk about. Hazards in the game, okay? There's obviously enemies. Every video game ever has enemies. But this one also has spikes, pits, the threat of being crushed. I mean, this happens a lot, right? Throughout this game, there's always this threat of being crushed, and it doesn't matter if you have rings or not. Like, no amount of rings can save you from being squashed to your death.
It's true.
And I thought that was interesting, that it's just like everywhere. It's prevalent that there's these things that are gonna crush you. And then to add everything to it, they also have water levels where, unlike Mario games, you need to get oxygen underwater.
Yeah, you have to get these air bubbles. It's a lot more realistic in that way.
Right, and outside of the realism, though, too, I think it's just like, there's a lot at stake here in terms of enemies, but also variety of ways to die. Did you guys find yourself getting hurt a lot?
Yeah, I was crushed a lot.
I think that like for me, it was a lot of getting hit and then grabbing one or two rings and like just kind of surviving by the one or two rings I have. And there's a lot of like risk reward consideration between, do I go fast, which feels so accurate to this character, but then risk running into something that I don't see coming. I mean, if you compare it to Stormlord, we had in that game, everything was much more meticulous and slow, and almost, I mean, it's just a different design decision, but it almost sometimes you're walking frustratingly slow. Not necessarily in a bad way, but in this game, it makes you want to move fast and not like think so much about your next move. So I think that kind of makes the obstacles all that much more dangerous.
And I think that's a great analogy because Stormlord is a game that also came out relatively recently. I mean, just a few episodes ago, but I think it came out 2 months prior. And that was a game that we were having trouble deciding, where does this go on our list, and ultimately it didn't get there. But now we've learned from that and we've seen what Sonic can do.
Yeah.
I really want to call out something. Sorry, Sean. I wanted to call out that purple worm.
Oh, God.
With the spikes all over his body.
Thing.
Absolutely hate it.
Yeah, that was my least favorite enemy to come across. But I do want to like come back to like one of the core gameplay elements is that like something that you don't really see or you didn't see. And I think it still makes Sonic unique is that with something like Mario or the other side scrollers that that exist in the gaming sphere at this time, like. There was never something akin to rings. Like the rings are prevalent, and all you need is one, and you get an extra hit. And I think that like these rings are so core to what makes this game feel like a Sonic game. Is that as long as you have a ring, you could sustain one blow, as long as you don't get crushed or something. And I think that allows you to be a little bit more risky in your play. Because you could still pick up your rings after you lose them. And this is something that you really haven't seen before.
Yeah, it's almost like in certain ways, Sonic is more powerful because he's almost like invincible as long as he has that one ring. And Joe mentioned that when you lose all your rings, when you get hit by an enemy, they scatter all over the place. You pick up maybe like 1 to 2 rings. I think that's true. I think it's very hard to like say you had like 55. You're never going to come out with like 10.
Yeah, you get staggered and it's really hard to get all of them, but you can still survive.
Which I think is great. I actually enjoy this rather than having power-ups. I think it would have been a mistake for Sonic to find like the super mushroom equivalent.
Yeah.
And then get like, like now he has longer spikes so he can last longer. It's like I don't think that would have made sense. So I think the ring thing is something that you understand right away because the graphic is so good for when they like go everywhere and scatter, but also because it's something that's communicated and then it's never talked about. There's no tutorial.
You just understand it.
There's no like, here's what you have to do. You understand it mostly because of people who have played Mario beforehand, but also because you understand it based on the game design.
Yeah, I don't think you need to have played something like Mario to understand Sonic.
Right.
I think that it's not necessarily. I don't even think that the ring thing is necessarily like overall a better way of designing a game. I just think that this game was designed around that concept, so it's hard to imagine it doing it any other way. Because like if you were to then give Sonic power-ups, like you said, it wouldn't really make sense with like, not that it wouldn't make sense, but it wouldn't fit as well with the way the game is actually designed and laid out.
But they had to come up with it. Like this didn't exist before this, so they had to, yeah.
Right. Oh, totally. I mean, I'm not taking the credit away for that. I just don't think that like they've necessarily come up with the better version. I just think they came up with a unique and maybe better, maybe worse, depending on your preference, but like interesting change of pace. Where it's not just the same old gameplay as we've seen a million times before.
And lastly, I mentioned the water hazard. I mean, there's nothing more terrifying in this whole world than that water music when time is up, right?
Yeah. Especially because you don't really get a countdown up to that. So once that happens, you're like, shit. Like, I wish you could see your time the whole time, but...
Yeah, I think you only get like 30 seconds tops.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you guys, but that was the easiest way for me to die, was just like taking for granted how much time I had and then not being near a bubble.
But we mentioned the like that little motif for running out of air, but the music in general in this game is so it's a paradigm shift.
Every single song on this soundtrack is a bop. I mean, I still jam to these all the time. And I'm not even trying to be funny here for a minute. This is an unbelievable soundtrack. This is probably up there with like Led Zeppelin 4 in terms of like albums to listen to.
Iconicness.
Yeah, it's like I think Labyrinth Zone is like this generation's Stairway to Heaven. So I did actually look up though a little bit about the music. So I'm glad you could shift us over to this, Sean, because Masato Nakamura was the one who was given the assignment of designing all the music for the game, but he's not a video game composer. He was the bassist and songwriter for a J-pop band called Dreams Come True. And Sega was like, he's hip. Let's hire him to write the music for this game.
Oh, man. I guess I got to look up Dreams Come True.
And you know that they're going to be good, too. I think what Nakamura manages to do here is find a balance between fun, groovy, and also like a tempo that complements the fast nature of the Sonic series. Because you got like Green Hill Zone is bumping, right? Like that is great, but it's also playful. And then you have, you know, what's that one? Starlight Zone I forget what that's called. It's something Star. And that one is like, you might hear that on like a Rainbow Road that Nintendo like ripped off from Sega. But that's what that sounds like, you know? It's got like a Rainbow Road vibe. Zone.
I don't know why you have to like you don't have to say it like in the context of like a stupid like Nintendo's.
I didn't want to be mean to our competitors.
True, yeah.
And Nakamura said that the hardest part of creating the soundtrack was the number of sounds that could be played concurrently. He was limited to just 4 sounds at a time and said that his lack of knowledge of music on computers made it impossible. So he was mostly just playing around until he was somewhat satisfied with whatever was coming out. And he made a masterpiece. Following up on gameplay here, do you guys think it's a little strange that we don't have the spin dash feature in Sonic 1?
I don't know what that is, actually.
Oh my gosh. Joe, you're breaking my heart here.
That's insane, Joe.
No, it's fine. It's fine. We love him. Joe,
we do love him.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What you do is when you crouch into a ball in any other Sonic game and you press the A button, it will start revving Sonic up, and then when you let go, he just kind of launches out like full speed.
That doesn't happen in this game?
It cannot happen in this game.
I think that, like, obviously I attempted to do it because I remember playing like Sonic and Knuckles and stuff like that when I was a kid, but I still think that, like, because those haven't come out yet, it cannot be a knock on it. But obviously you really... I would very much prefer to play this game with the revving speed dashes.
Yeah, and Joe, to your credit, the spin dash is there in a way that Sonic will, when going very fast through loops or through forced slides, he will rev up into a ball and be able to tackle like anything that comes in his way.
Right.
So
right.
that is kind of like the spin dash. It's just that you can't manually force it. It has to be stage designed.
It's funny because I thought that I actually like held it down one time and started to rev up, but I didn't do it. Like I didn't actually do I just thought that was a thing that I like wasn't ready for. I didn't want to go that fast.
Right.
So I didn't try it.
That's
But I thought that was like I was able to rev up at one point. Maybe not.
No, I think it wasn't the revving. It still does have like if you change direction in a certain way, like it will just start making you tumble. But it isn't the same.
Okay. Maybe that's what it was. I remember curling up in a ball when I wasn't really moving fast, and it made a sound as if like it was revving up. So I thought if I like hit, if I like launched at that moment, I would go flying or something. But I never tried it.
Right, and you know what? I don't think I really miss the spin dash in this one. I think it would have been strange in a lot of these levels because these levels have more traps and pits. Whereas I think once the spin dash gets introduced in Sonic 2, I think those levels had, now that was a gameplay feature, they had that in mind and allowed for like longer sections without a pit in it. I don't think you would have gotten away with the spin dash anywhere in the Scrap Brain Zone.
Well, yeah, this game is littered with very devious traps, like you mentioned, and it's actually it's almost like they're just beckoning you to try something, and then they'll just throw you into a pit. It just seemed like very confrontational.
I think
the developers of this game,
right? I think Sega knew that they could win at any time, and they're just toying with us, the player. Yeah, and that's why they essentially like let you win at the end of the game. If you won, they let you win.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do want to try the spin dash in Sonic 1, it was available on the Game Boy Advance version of Sonic the Hedgehog 1, which I think is crazy. One, that it exists.
Game Boy.
Yeah, Game Boy Advance. One, that it exists, but also that they then added the spin dash, but didn't change the level designs. So you can see what that's like.
Maybe I'll try it. I've never actually owned a Game Boy.
Yeah, I can understand why not. And then, can we talk briefly about in Act 3 of everything, there's the Eggman, or, sorry, you guys want me to call him Robotnik, these boss fights. It is
Robotnik.
Yeah, these boss fights with him. And, they're not necessarily hard, but they're fun, right? They're playful.
I think that I wouldn't say they're not fun, definitely. I mean, they're fun, but I did wish that there was at least in the first couple, I wish there was a higher level of difficulty on these.
I think regardless of how difficult the boss battles may or may not be, like that feedback you get when you hit his little circle thing.
yeah. Whatever that is, it's like
vehicle.
His floating vehicle.
It feels good. Yeah.
Well, there's a good sound there. Yeah, that sound is really nice.
Yeah.
I also think it's better to fight. This is not Mega Man levels of quality, but I think it's better to fight a different Eggman every time than to fight the same cat dinosaur every single stage where all you have to do is jump over him and hit an axe.
Cat dinosaur.
Yeah, whatever that thing is. Now he's the president of that company. That's Bowser.
Oh, that's the Mario bad guy.
Yeah, the Mario franchise that we don't usually talk about on the show.
Right, of course.
Now Bowser's the president of Nintendo, so that just goes to show you how things have really gone to shit over there. All right, what else did I have? Oh, so, one thing about the boss fights, though, if we can just get right to the end of the game here, there's the final stage, which is just a boss fight, and you're not given any rings, which I thought was an interesting choice, because I was like, wow, you're going to need, at least one ring, hopefully. But no, you don't really even need that one ring, because this is a very easy last boss fight, provided that you figure out the timing, because it never changes. There's a corner you can hide in, which is not like they didn't plan for it. They totally gave you that whole corner to hide in. And the balls, energy balls that can shock you, they never change position, so you just have to find the center part and then jump over them, and that's all it is. As long as you time the jump, you'll never get squashed by Eggman. And I just thought that was a really weak final boss, and probably the only down part of this entire franchise.
It is strange that, a game that has been so devious with its traps and making the levels leading up to this boss fight so nerve-wracking at times, and then they just allow you to sort of game it. I don't know.
Yeah,
you're right. This is the only blemish.
I felt that. I mean, not that you would game the other bosses, but that's kind of how I felt about all the bosses. That the levels themselves were just way harder for the most part than the boss battle, which felt a little backwards to me.
I would agree. Yeah, again, they're no Mega Man level quality, and I would honestly say that maybe the ending being so easy is just proof that Sonic died in the previous level and was just dreaming that he had won.
I've always thought that about this game.
Yeah. There is one thing that's really cool, though, about all of these, and that's the special stages. In every level, there's an opportunity to get to a special stage if you collect 50 coins. They have this
rings.
Oh,
Mike!
Whoa!
Rings.
My bad. Sorry, I felt like an alternate universe crushing in on me. These rings. If you collect 50 of them, a big ring will be at the end of the stage, and you have to jump into it. First off, amazing graphics on that 3D ring.
Amazing.
But then you jump into it, and you go to the special stage. Joe, did you make it to the special stage?
Yes, a couple times. Okay. And I like the special stage. It's pretty. You want me to describe it before we kind of go into what we feel
please,
like? So what you do in the special stage, you're kind of floating around in this giant area it's almost like a little maze with different walls around you, and as you turn the direction of Sonic, you change the direction that the maze is turning. So the gravity sort of like takes you to wherever the bottom is at the time. And your goal is to just kind of collect as many rings and fall through as many rings without reaching the end of it. Or, you get enough rings, you can get an extra continue, or you can get a Chaos Emerald. So it's really just kind of like collecting things without hitting these certain points that'll end the bonus level for you.
And it has, unfortunately, the worst music in the whole game, and it's very repetitive. Doesn't this kind of feel like you've glitched the game a little when you jump into this? It doesn't look normal compared to the rest of the game. It feels like you've kind of walked into like this minus world style thing.
Yeah. I agree. Because whenever I think of like the special stages in these games, I think back to, I forget which one it is, but it's where you're sort of running in a globe.
Oh, Sonic 3.
The shoulder
yes.
thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sonic 3. Like those are my favorite special stages in any Sonic game. And this does sort of feel like a letdown in comparison to that.
Yeah, I think also they just kind of like the first one is approachable and lets you understand the concept of collecting the Chaos Emerald. And even though the physics are like super weird, as Joe described, you get over it because it's a short one. If you try to collect all 6, that's right, there's only 6, not 7 in the first Sonic game. If you try to collect all 6 Chaos Emeralds, by the last 3, it is super tedious. And there's so many of those little diamonds to crush to get to the Chaos Emerald.
Yeah.
And there's so many exits. It's almost like they didn't want you to get all 6. But the weirdest part is that the payoff is almost nothing. I mean, in future games, when you get all 7 Chaos Emeralds, you turn into Super Sonic and you're invincible and you run on coin energy. Like, that's incredible.
It is incredible, and it does look fucking awesome.
Yes, and meanwhile, in this one, if you collect all 6 at the end of the game, instead, Sonic just at the ending, it's the same ending, but with all of his animal friends freed, he just shows all 6 Chaos Emeralds, and then it's like, thanks for playing. Like, no, turn into Super Sonic. Like,
yeah, it almost feels like a trophy thing or something. Like, you have bragging rights because you have all the Chaos Emeralds.
Yeah, I think, though, that, like, with the Chaos Emeralds sort of trying to be, like, the true ending, it does kind of suck that it is that lackluster at the end. Like, a true ending sort of playthrough should have a little bit more behind it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. About the bonus level, also, I think something that we glossed over, though, was that you can get extra continues. Which, usually I'm not crazy about games that, like, do the full game over. Like, okay, you gotta start back from the beginning of the entire game. And I still wouldn't say that this has sold me on that concept. But I did like the idea that, like, the fact that your game is over is fully in your hands. Even if you've been dying, you could have been getting those bonus levels and collecting more continues. So if you lose all your lives, you could still start with 3 more lives. And then that was kind of cool. That it gives you a little bit more agency in whether or not you have to start back from zone 1.
Lastly, I think we need to talk about the little touches in the game because they're some of the best parts of the game. The Sonic waiting animation, if you don't do anything, he just kind of like starts tipping his toe and then he like checks his watch and looks at the screen. Like,
he's so sassy. That's what I love about Sonic. He's so sassy. He doesn't care about anybody.
Except for his woodland friends.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yes, and I mentioned that the animals are a nice another little touch because even if they like jump off in Marble Hill Zone into the lava, they don't like disappear. You see them continue to hop and they're just like seemingly invincible. So I love that about that they made sure that that the animals got around safe because otherwise what is the whole point of the game if the animals would die? And then also if Sonic's on like the very edge of a platform, he does this thing with like his hands where he's like, whoa, like he thinks he's going to fall, but he's just psyching you out. He knows he's not going to.
Yeah, I know. He knows. Otherwise he'd take a step back. The goofball.
So it's little things like that I really like. But then there's this whole other section of the game, which I'm going to call cheats. And there's so many cheats in this game, and I really appreciate the fact that they put in all of these different things like a level select and a sound select, so this way you can go through all the best music. But here comes the big one. There's a much longer code for a configurator mode. And in this configurator mode, you can literally redesign the levels of any of the Sonic games. I think that of Sonic 1.
How do you get to these modes?
So in at the start screen, I mean, the level select one's super easy. I believe once you see the Sonic the Hedgehog logo, you do up, down, left, right, press the A button and hold it down, and then hit start. And that one will give you the stage select one. The configurator mode, I don't remember the whole thing, but it's the same thing on the title screen. You pick a bunch of things, and then Sonic, as the character, you can enter the config mode in Green Hill Zone, and you can cycle through all the other objects. So Sonic will turn into a coin, and a ring, and then you can put that ring anywhere on the map. Or you could just glitch yourself through all the walls and take yourself to the end of the level. It's so crazy that it's like Mario Maker was 20 years too late.
It really was, because this is the better version of it.
You could put any enemy, anything you want into these config modes. And so it's like you are a programmer in certain ways. In a little bit of a way, everyone is a Sonic the Hedgehog designer.
You know what? That is one of the best ways to describe it.
All right. So does anybody else have any other little touches they wanted to talk about?
You know what? You jumped right into my first one with the waiting animation, but I also really like that once you hit the end of each stage, like that sign that you blow past and you make it spin, and there's also like the little bonuses if you jump at the right moment. But I think that is just like the best touch of finality to each level.
Right. And Joe?
I mean, I think you guys kind of nailed it. I think this is just a pretty polished game. I mean, there's just a lot of little details. It's I don't really have too much more to add. It's just very well, like every sprite is that you can tell they paid close attention to detail. They added those little animations and stuff. I don't have anything bad to say about it.
Yeah, and I think also we forgot to mention that whole like other motif of Sonic destroying technology to get the real rewards of the environment.
You're right. Like, he basically is the first eco-terrorist.
Right, because all the computers in the game have, like, cool power-ups in them, but they must be destroyed if you want to get them. So, clearly, we shouldn't have... Computers and Mother Nature can't coexist.
Yeah, and it's, like, I think our audio producer was actually telling me something about how this is sort of, like, the preface to the conspiracy theory. I don't want to give credence to it, that, like birds may or may not be real in real life.
Oh, that they're a government drone?
Yeah. Something along those lines.
Well, they're actually Dr. Robotnik's drones.
That's what I'm thinking with all of like these things.
Right. All right, so I think that's enough conspiracies, and now let's move into the spin-off section. As everybody knows, Sonic the Hedgehog is a amazingly popular franchise that still continues today, and we're not going to talk about every single game. Instead, I just wanted to tell you about where else you can play Sonic 1, because you can play it on, did you know, the Sega Master System?
I did hear about this. It looks a little goofy.
It is a little goofy. It's the 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog 1. A couple differences. It has an overworld map, which is really cool to have like this giant map of the entire place of where you go to, so you can kind of understand like, oh, this is where Sonic lives, and then Marble Hill Zone's over here, and they just keep going up the mountain, essentially, until they get to the Scrap Brain Zone. I thought that was, like, really, really important to know where you are at all times in the map.
It is important. I would also say... I
wish that we would have got that.
Yeah, I would also say, though, that with the Master System version, I've only watched, like, some videos, but as an 8-bit game, it is still very good looking, and I would say better looking than anything on that NES.
That's probably true, but it also had to make some sacrifices too, Sean. Your rings, they don't scatter everywhere. Instead, just one ring, which contains all of your rings, falls out of place, and then if you can collect that, you pretty much get all your coins back minus like a few.
Yeah, I mean, that's compromise, but I just like the enhanced color palette of the Master System in comparison to other games of that generation. It still has that Sonic feel.
Yeah, and if you... Oh, yeah, Joe,
well, I was going to say, I actually, until right now, totally forgot that I have played this version of it. Just because at one point I did own a Wii, I know. But on the Wii, you could buy, their digital downloads or whatever, and one of them was Sonic the Hedgehog, and I just saw it and thought it was this version of Sonic the Hedgehog, which I had only played a few times anyways when I was a kid. And once I downloaded it, I realized that maybe I was mistaken. And I'll say you can definitely tell that it does not control the same way as what we're used to on this Genesis version of Sonic the Hedgehog. There's no question.
It is nice though it's definitely nice that they gave an option for people who were too poor to have a Genesis. I think that about wraps it up. But you could also play Sonic 1 on the Game Gear portable, but unfortunately it's still the same. It's the Master System version again, so take that for what you want out of it. And I still know that the Sega Nomad, you could play with that if you wanted to just take your Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis cart on the go. You just needed to own a Nomad. And there was also Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, which is not Sonic 1, even though people might think that. It's Sega Sonic the Hedgehog. It came out to arcades, and it features an armadillo character as well. It's all kind of loopy. Really hard to find, honestly, and to get a hold of. I don't even know if it's been re-put on any of the newer systems, so I'm not quite sure how you'd get that other than pirating it. That's about everything that I had here, because everything else is just kind of like virtual console stuff, like Joe already mentioned. So pretty much Sonic 1 is a game you can play wherever you want. There's a version that came to the 3DS that lets you play in stereoscopic 3D, so you need that in your life. Yep, and I think with that, we're going to take it into the Essential Games list. Guys, it's one thing to make a game that is the answer to your competitor's system sellers. It's another thing to walk all over it and then ooze this much style. Sonic the Hedgehog won the Golden Joystick Game of the Year award for that year, beating out Super Mario World. And for that reason, it's on my Essential Games list. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, I gotta say that, this is the game I have been waiting for. I enjoyed a lot of the games from, the early years. Golden Axe was sort of, the game I just wanted something to beat Golden Axe for me. And it's finally happened. This is the game. So it is on the Essential Games list.
You'll love to hear it. Now, Joe, you've already been outvoted. But if you'd like to join us, you can join us in the Essential Games list.
So like I said, I never played this too much when I was younger. I had a few experiences with it. So kind of playing it a little fresh, I will say it lived up to my expectations. I won't say that it's a perfect game, but I think it's definitely an incredible game. So I'll put it on the Essential Games list.
There you have it. That's 3, and Sonic is the newest member of the Essential Games list. Guys, how do we feel? Do we think we're ready for Sonic 2 someday?
Oh, I can't wait.
I'm ready right now.
Yeah, okay. You're buying your copies early.
Yes.
Now, don't forget, next week we're playing Batman.
Nice.
I couldn't quite tell which version of Batman that is. I didn't look up the actual game yet, but it's just calling it Batman is kind of weird, because it's is it that 1989 Tim Burton movie? Is it the animated series? Is it neither of those and just its own game based on the comics? I can't wait to find out. And you guys like Batman, right?
It looks like it's based off the movie.
Oh, great. I haven't seen that movie in 20 minutes, so I would love to see it again.
So, I can't wait.
Yeah, everybody knows that Jack Nicholson warned Heath Ledger. Everyone knows that.
Are you trying to say that he deserved what happened, Mike?
All I'll say is that when they pressed Jack for a question, he said, "I warned him." That's all he said, and then he walked away.
What? Is that true? He really said that?
Who is that guy?
This is
Jesus.
Insane. This is insane.
It happened. Another thing that happened, Harley Quinn, the one fabulous emancipation of Birds of Prey, that movie came out and then everybody forgot about it.
I know, I'm glad that nobody watched it.
But you know what people did watch, Sean?
What's that?
The Sonic the Hedgehog movie.
You know what? I actually owned a couple of the comic books too.
I owned a couple of the comic books too. It's actually a great series, not just for children, but for men and women of all ages to understand the relationship of our animal friends. And Sonic never really got into that furry territory. Well, that's all the time we have for Sega Nostalgia. Join us next week for Batman, as we said. Remember that we post episodes every Wednesday, and we'll talk to you guys soon. I'm Michael Esposito. You can find me on @EspositoFilm on Twitter. Bye.